I treated him like my backup plan for years. Now it breaks my heart seeing him with another woman. Seeing their picturesque, perfectly aesthetic relationship on Instagram and Twitter stung every time. It was dishonest. They made it seem like their lives and their relationship was so perfect, but I knew that it just couldn't be. No one had the perfect relationship. We were all messed up in one way or the other, and eventually that affected our relationships. Or at least that's how I see things, and I'm pretty sure most people would agree. But who knows? Maybe I'm right, or maybe I'm just trying to cope with what happened. It was awful seeing him with her. I know that I don't really have the right to say that, but it's true. It sounds selfish, I know, but it genuinely broke my heart to see him so happy, especially because it was with her and not me. It's not like I never loved him or anything like that. This post might make it seem like I never cared for him at all, but I did. In my own way. I'll always care for him. Even now when he wants nothing to do with me, I don't think I ever really appreciated what I had until it was gone. And I know how cliché that sounds, but it's the truth. He gave me something safe, something constant, something I could come back to when everything else didn't work out. And I can admit that I was selfish. I can admit that I manipulated things and took advantage of him and his kindness. It doesn't make me sound any better, but I feel like I should explain that I was going to come back to him in the end. That was always the plan. But now he's moved on, and seeing him so happy now with someone else feels like swallowing glass. I met him 4 years ago at a school play I was assistant directing. It was a small production for the second graders in the school I worked for. A small, incredibly awkward, but ultimately adorable take on Peter Pan. My boss, the director, was a failed author who tried to inject needless bits of symbolism and pretentiousness in all the plays that we did. She'd originally tried to get the school to put on something Shakespearean, but was thankfully shut down because no one, including me, wanted to see a bunch of 6-year-olds struggle to speak in Old English and wear stuffy costumes. She was so upset by the rejection that she all but washed her hands of the play. She saw Peter Pan as beneath her and was happy to sit on the sidelines, which made the play kind of my directorial debut. It was just a silly little play, but still I poured my heart into it. I was stressed, underpaid, and running purely on caffeine, adrenaline, and the need to prove that I was good at what I did. The cast was chaotic and made up of a handful of overeager kids. The props were falling apart because the drama club was the most underfunded, and most days ended with me wondering how I ended up in that position in the first place. But I loved it. I didn't know it at the time, but Ethan, male Thrifty, had shown up for the last 4 rehearsals we'd had before the big day. It wasn't a weird or particularly interesting thing to do. Lots of parents came and watched. They never cared much for the show. They were just there to get videos of their kids acting on stage and having fun. They could be a bit distracting sometimes, but I'd learned to ignore them. That was how I avoided noticing Ethan for so long. I didn't notice him until the very last rehearsal. I was going over lines with the kids when I looked in the crowd and saw that only one parent didn't have their phone up and ready to record. He sat in the back row with his arms crossed and this expression on his face like he wanted to actually understand what we were doing. That immediately made me interested in him, but I knew he must have been someone's dad and likely married, so I kept my distance. He wasn't anyone's dad, though. I would later find out that he'd been showing up that time for his niece Lana. She was playing Tinkerbell and had begged him to come. I would also find out later that her mom, his sister, was a bit of a workaholic and never had any time to come see the rehearsals. Something was always more important, so she had been let down so many times by her, and Ethan had promised he wouldn't do the same. The night of the play, we almost missed each other. I was working backstage, making sure that costumes fit right and that my actors remembered at least some of their lines. I watched the whole thing from the sidelines and clapped along with the parents when it was time for them to do their bow. After that, I had to go mingle with the parents. Something that my boss would always saw was a part of the job, too. That was when I met Ethan for the first time. He came up to me and complimented both the show and my directing. He told me a bit shyly that he had watched a few of the rehearsals and that he could tell from that I had real talent. He said that he knew who I was before he even came to any of the rehearsals because his niece always talked about me. I remember saying all good things I hope and him laughing before nodding his head. After that, I told him that I had noticed him too and asked why he had never come up to me at any of the rehearsals before, and he told me that he was just waiting for the right time. We continued talking for a bit as parents mingled and children told their parents about how exciting their first time being on stage was. Eventually, we had to go our separate ways, and before I left, he asked me for my number and if we could get a coffee sometime. We talked on the phone for a bit for weeks. Nothing flirty or weird in those early days, just banter. Complaints about budget cuts, inside jokes about the cast, jokes about how awful the fake trees looked. It felt easy, natural, like we'd been coworkers for months instead of just two strangers thrown together by some chaotic school play. Eventually, though, we did make things more physical and finally went out for coffee. I remember that he took me to this small corner cafe a few blocks away from the school, the kind of place that still had bookshelves and mismatched mugs. It started out as just coffee between us. It wasn't that I wasn't attracted to him. I was. The vibe was just very friendly at first, but then, after a while of talking and dates that started with coffee and then progressed to drinks together and then dinners at his place, things started to change. Dinners became nights in, watching bad movies, complaining about them, and then taking things a step further sexually. We were incredibly compatible. Kind of a perfect match if you believe in that sort of thing, but it was never officially dating. And honestly, I didn't want it to be. That's probably a little bit surprising to you. Usually it's girls fawning over guys and waiting months, years even, for them to make them their girlfriend or wives. But that just wasn't me. I didn't want a title or ring. I just wanted to have fun and be cared for. And I was experiencing that with Ethan. So I never felt the need for anything official. I don't think I'd ever felt the need for something official in any relationship before. And don't get me wrong, none of it was because of Ethan. He genuinely was perfect in all the ways I should have wanted. Steady, kind. He remembered things, both the important ones and the ones that were completely useless. He knew my date of birth and when I needed to pay my car insurance, but he also knew that I absolutely hated olives on pizzas and always had to close the windows before watching a scary movie. Things like that. He knew the names of every kid in the play, and he'd attend rehearsals when he really didn't have to. He'd sit in the back and clap louder than anyone when something went right. He made me feel safe, and that should have been good. It was good. But I guess it also wasn't enough. He made me feel great most of the time, and I loved spending time with, but he also made me feel bored. I never told anyone that. It wasn't Ethan's fault. It was mine. I wasn't used to safe. I was used to the guys who texted at 2 a.m. or disappeared for weeks. I guess you could say I was more of a situationship kind of girl. I liked the freedom that came with it, the variety and unpredictability. I liked that thrill, even if it always ended badly. I don't think I was built for monogamy, or at least that's what I told myself. But I didn't want to break it off with Ethan. I knew that he wasn't like me. He was a serial monogamist and believed in only one kind of way of being together. He believed in getting a girlfriend, making her a wife, settling down, and having a few kids. That's not what I wanted. I knew that we wanted different things, but I still wasn't honest with him. I knew that telling him the truth would definitely make him leave, and I wasn't ready to let go of him yet. I enjoyed what we had. It's just that I also wanted to enjoy other things every once in a while, too. So I kept Ethan in this gray area. I let him love me quietly, while I pretended we were just friends who kissed and had sex sometimes. I told him that we were just going with the flow, seeing where things took us, whatever I could to make him stay with me but not actually with me. I can be honest now. I can admit that I wanted my cake and I wanted to eat it too. I wanted Ethan and I wanted other people, and I wanted both at the same time, so I didn't ask for commitment and I was a bit surprised when he didn't push. It was risky, and each time he would kind of bring up what we were to each other or where the relationship was going, and I would dodge his questions or distract him with sex, I was worried that it would be his last straw, that he would get sick of me being so evasive and emotionally unavailable and decide to go find someone else. But he didn't. And it took me a while to figure out why, but I eventually did. While I was avoiding commitment at all costs and holding on to Ethan, he was already fully committed to whatever I would give him. He just never said it out loud, but I knew that he was hopelessly in love with me and would do whatever he could to make sure that I stayed. Suddenly, the tables were flipped around, and I realized that he was the one desperate one, and I counted on that. I relied on the fact that he'd always be there no matter how badly I treated him. Like I said, I knew what I wanted, And after I figured out that Ethan would always be there waiting for me to love him back, I took advantage and went after it. I canceled plans all the time. I'd disappear for weekends and then come back like nothing happened. It wasn't like Ethan wasn't curious or upset by all my absences. He was. But he also knew that saying anything to me could lead to me leaving. And then he would be left with nothing instead of the little attention that I gave him. If I were desperately in love with someone and waited day and night for when they would finally call back, when I could hear their voice or see them again, if I was that infatuated, then I too would take what I could get, even if it meant them only recognizing that I existed for 15 minutes a day. And Ethan was that in love. Like I said, he never said it, but I could tell. He did everything for me short of actually worshiping the ground I walked on. He changed my oil, cleaned my apartment when I couldn't. He even helped repair some of the old stage props when he could. It wasn't like I didn't appreciate all of it, though. I did. I was incredibly grateful to Ethan. I just couldn't love him the way that he loved me. And I know that not loving him is no excuse to do what I did. I realize that now. But back then, I was selfish and greedy. I wanted it all, and I didn't care that I broke Ethan's heart to get it. It started with the little things I mentioned before, partying and being gone all the time. Hardly ever texting back, but still expecting him to water the plants in my kitchen and make sure that my parking ticket got paid off. Or never returning calls, but still expecting dinner and sex when I showed up at his place. I even started to expect him to spend hours helping out with the plays because he'd done it for so long. It was cruel of me to do that, but he never complained, so I just didn't stop. I think some part of me had to have known that I was basically torturing him, that it must have been horrible to only get bits, scraps basically, of someone that you loved and then watch said person act so dismissive and uncaring toward you. But at the time, I just couldn't really bring myself to care or stop. Ethan would have done anything for me. Why would I have wanted to give that up? I'm not sure when exactly things changed, or when I really decided that I wanted even more than what I'd already had. I'm not sure if it was something that I had already thought about, or if it had been a spur-of-the-moment decision. I just remember being at the bar I'd gone to with my friends after telling Ethan that we were just getting dinner together. It was just supposed to be some simple flirting at the bar with this guy who had been staring at me all night. That was it, but somehow it ended up being more. He bought me a drink, and then we chatted for a bit. He kept the drinks coming, and I was all too happy to let loose and enjoy myself. One thing led to another, and I ended up kissing him. It wasn't anything extraordinary, it was just your average drunken kiss at the bar, but it made me feel free. I should have felt awful, but I genuinely felt great. Because I knew that even though I had kissed another man at the bar, I would still come back to my apartment to find Ethan there waiting for me, dinner probably made. And when I got back that night and Ethan was waiting for me, he even hugged me at the door and didn't say anything about the fact that I was obviously drunk. It confirmed what I'd already known, that Ethan would always stay. He always stayed calm, always came back, always forgave. I thought that I would always have him. It was about 2 years into our relationship when I started sleeping with other men. I had kissed other people before that and partied as much as I wanted to. I think Ethan must have known about some of it, or suspected at least, but he never said a word. It was his silence for so long that made me feel so much bolder, brave enough to actually sleep with other people. I was pretty secretive about it, though. Having a sneaky kiss while I was out drinking was one thing, but actually sleeping with someone else? That was definitely cheating, even though what Ethan and I had was barely defined. We weren't official, but we were in some sort of a relationship. It was still a betrayal what I did, but I didn't stop. I thought that he would be there forever, that I would always have him by my side no matter what I did, that he would stay with me no matter what I put him through. But I was so wrong. My years of doing whatever I wanted whenever I wanted had made me reckless. It had started out as something careful and secret, but after Ethan had stayed oblivious for so long, I started to get a bit too wild, too careless. I wasn't covering my tracks or being cautious because I thought that even if Ethan found out, he wouldn't do anything. He'd done nothing for so long, I never expected what came next. Up until a few months ago, I'd kept all my hookups away from my life with Ethan. It was like I had two parts of me, and I enjoyed both of them, so long as I could keep them reasonably separate. But I started to get overconfident. I brought one of them, this guy I'd been texting on some dating app, over to my apartment. Ethan had told me that he was leaving the city for a bit for some work, so I thought I was in the clear. I should have been more careful, but I wasn't. We were right in the middle of having sex when I heard the door unlock. There was no time to do anything but panic as Ethan saw me in bed with another man. He looked like his world had fallen apart in that moment, and that was when the guilt finally set in for me. It was like I didn't realize or care about the hurt that I was causing him because I couldn't see it. It was something I'd never had to deal with personally, so it was easy to ignore. But seeing him like that made me feel awful. He waited for me to get dressed and kick the guy out. Then he asked for an explanation. He was angry and practically yelling. He was all demanding in a way I didn't like, and it made me feel defensive. He had come into my apartment. I'd given him a spare key, but still, like he owned the place, and then started screaming at me about what I did in my free time. We had some kind of relationship, but he wasn't my boyfriend, so I told him that. I reminded him that we weren't in a serious relationship. I called what we had, our 4 years together, casual and not serious. And it was like something shifted in him in that moment. He became calmer, and he told me that I was right, that he was wrong to barge in and yell at me. Then, like nothing had happened at all, he wished me good night and then left. It was all so weird, but I had just assumed that my luck had won out once again, and that Ethan was still going to follow me around like a lovesick puppy, doing whatever I wanted, no matter how much I hurt him. I had no idea what was coming next, or what he was planning for me. The shift was subtle at first. He started texting a little less. He stopped bringing coffee. Then one night after rehearsal, he didn't stay to talk, just waved goodbye and walked out. Or sometimes I would catch him chatting with the director, but by the time I finished up closing up, he was gone. I thought he was just tired, that seeing me with someone else had been too much for him, and he needed a bit of space. Then he stopped showing up at rehearsal, so much that even my director asked about where he was. I'd just thought she was curious, but I'd been blind to the truth. It was only when he stopped showing up completely that I panicked. He didn't come to rehearsals. He was barely ever at the apartment. It was almost like he was avoiding me. Again, the tables had turned. I was the one constantly texting, but he only ever replied with short answers. I called. He let it ring. I tried doing what I could to reach him, but it was almost like he'd fallen off the face of the earth. I could have tried harder to get to him, like actually go to his apartment or try calling his sister, but I had another play coming up. A pretty big one that I was chosen to direct. So I was too busy to constantly wonder about where he was, and I just assumed he would come back when he was ready. And I was right. He did come back, just not in the way that I expected. When he finally came back, it was on the night of the play. I tried calling him the entire day, and for a second I started to worry if he was truly done with me. But then the curtains went up, and there he was in the crowd. Except he wasn't alone. The head director was sitting beside him. I was confused for a second, but then he smiled at me, so I thought everything was fine. I thought that maybe since I was the one directing, she'd decided to watch from the crowd. The play was a success. Everyone loved it, but I could barely concentrate. I had the whole play to obsess over Ethan's weird behavior and why he was sitting next to her. So when the curtains finally came down, I didn't even wait to congratulate my actors. I rushed into the crowd and saw them standing next to each other. Ethan saw me and smiled again, like he was genuinely happy to see me and happy for the play. But then she grabbed him face and kissed right in front of me. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was completely shocked and angry. I remember storming up to them and demanding to know what the hell he was doing. That was when he looked at me right in the eyes and repeated what I'd told him before, that we were casual and that we'd never been serious about things. He said all that before he kissed her again. It was what I'd wanted for years, for him to agree to something casual and unserious, but hearing him say it to me while he was holding on to another woman made me feel sick. I was also completely embarrassed. My yelling had caused some parents to turn and watch. They'd seen and heard everything. I couldn't embarrass myself any further, so I had no choice but to walk away. Later, my boss would come up to me to check if things were all right between us. It was through her that I found out that they'd been seeing each other for weeks, and that he'd told her that things weren't serious between him and me when they'd started. I told her that everything was fine and that he was right. Things weren't serious. It was the truth, but it tasted so bitter coming out of my mouth. I thought they wouldn't last, that he was just with her to get back at me, and he would come crawling back soon enough, but it's been months since then, and they're still together. They look happier than he and I ever were, and it genuinely makes me feel sick. I couldn't handle seeing them together at the theater after that, so I had to leave last week. It turned out that I wasn't the polygamous free spirit that I thought I was. I just wanted to be selfish, and I found someone kind enough to let me take advantage of him for way too long. I'd never actually thought he would leave, even when I ignored him, even when I kept him in limbo. Even when I used him for comfort and refused to define us, I always thought he'd be there, waiting for me. But he wasn't. And now, seeing him with someone else, it's like I'm the one who's been replaced. Suddenly, I'm the option. The could have been, the girl he learned from. I don't know how to get him back, or if I even deserve to. I just know that seeing him with her hurts more than anything.